3,000 years ago, long before satellites and GPS, ancient sailors navigated the vast Mediterranean Sea with nothing but the stars, currents, and their wits. Among them, the Phoenicians stood out, masters of the waves, their ships laden with goods that connected distant civilizations. But here's the twist: much of their story remains hidden, buried beneath the ocean or lost to time. What if the key to understanding our modern world lies in the forgotten routes and technologies of these ancient mariners? How did they cross vast oceans without the tools we take for granted today? And what secrets still lie beneath the waves, waiting to be discovered? In this video, we'll dive into the depths of history to uncover the mysteries of ancient maritime trade, from forgotten routes and lost technologies to the cultural exchanges that shaped our world. So, are you ready to set sail on a journey through time? Let's explore the untold stories of the seas that connected humanity long before the world became as small as it feels today. The story of ancient maritime civilizations is one of ingenuity and ambition, driven by the need to connect distant lands and cultures. Among the first to truly master the seas were the Phoenicians, whose skill in shipbuilding and navigation became legendary. They crafted their vessels from cedar wood, a material prized for its durability and resistance to rot, allowing their ships to withstand long voyages across the Mediterranean. These ships weren't just tools of transport, they were symbols of power, enabling the Phoenicians to establish trade routes that stretched from the shores of modern-day Lebanon to as far as Spain and even beyond the Strait of Gibraltar. But the Phoenicians weren't alone in their maritime pursuits. The Greeks, with their island-dotted homeland, saw the sea as both a challenge and an opportunity. Their triremes, sleek and swift warships powered by rows of oarsmen, became the backbone of their naval dominance. Meanwhile, the Egyptians harnessed the predictable currents of the Nile to move goods and people with remarkable efficiency. For them, the river wasn't just a waterway, it was the lifeblood of their civilization, a natural highway that connected Upper and Lower Egypt and facilitated trade with neighboring regions. Geography played a crucial role in shaping these early maritime powers. The Mediterranean, with its calm waters and strategic location, became a crossroads of cultures where goods, ideas, and technologies flowed as freely as the tides. The Nile's annual floods brought fertile soil to Egypt's fields, ensuring a surplus of grain that could be traded for luxury items like timber, spices, and precious metals. These natural advantages, combined with human ingenuity, allowed these civilizations to thrive and expand their influence far beyond their borders. As these societies grew, so did their networks. Trade routes became conduits not just for goods but for knowledge, art, and even religion. The Phoenicians, for instance, are credited with spreading the alphabet, a revolutionary system of writing that would shape the course of history. The Greeks, through their colonies and trading posts, carried the seeds of their culture to distant shores, laying the groundwork for the classical world. And the Egyptians, with their vast wealth and resources, became a hub for international commerce, attracting merchants from across the ancient world. These early maritime civilizations didn't just navigate the seas, they transformed them into highways of progress, connecting distant lands and weaving a complex web of trade and cultural exchange. But as their networks expanded, so did their challenges. How did they maintain these vast connections? What drove them to venture into the unknown, risking storms, pirates, and the uncertainties of the open sea? The answers lie in the next chapter of this fascinating story, where we'll uncover the secrets of their enduring legacy and the lasting impact of their maritime achievements. For centuries, the Silk Road has captured our imaginations as the ultimate symbol of ancient trade, with caravans of camels trudging across deserts and mountains. But what if I told you there was another Silk Road, one that crisscrossed the oceans, carrying not just silk but spices, gems, and ideas across vast distances. This was the Maritime Silk Road, a network of sea routes that connected the East and West long before the age of European explorers. While the overland routes are famous, the sea routes were just as vital, if not more so, in shaping the ancient world. Picture this: ships laden with Indian pepper, Chinese silk, and Arabian frankincense sailing across the Indian Ocean. These goods weren't just luxuries, they were the lifeblood of empires. The Roman Empire, for example, was obsessed with Indian pepper. It was so valuable that it was often used as currency, and Roman ships braved the open seas to bring back shiploads of this prized spice. But how did these ancient mariners navigate such vast distances without modern technology? The answer lies in the monsoon winds. These seasonal winds, blowing predictably from the southwest in summer and the northeast in winter, became the highways of the ancient world. Sailors timed their voyages to catch these winds, allowing them to travel thousands of miles with remarkable efficiency. This maritime network didn't just move goods, it moved people, cultures, and ideas. Ports like Aden in Yemen, Calicut in India, and Guangzhou in China became melting pots where merchants, sailors, and scholars exchanged not only goods but also knowledge. The spread of Buddhism from India to Southeast Asia, the introduction of Chinese ceramics to the Middle East, and the exchange of navigational techniques between Arab and Indian sailors all happened along these watery highways. Yet, for all its importance, the Maritime Silk Road remains overshadowed by its overland counterpart. Why is that? Perhaps it's because land routes leave behind more visible traces, ruins, caravanserais, and artifacts, while the sea swallows much of its history. But the truth is, the maritime routes were just as transformative, if not more so, in shaping the ancient world. And here's where things get even more intriguing. Not all of these routes survived. Some vanished, leaving behind only fragments of their existence. What happened to them? What forces, natural or man-made, caused these once thriving networks to disappear? That's a mystery we'll dive into next. One of the most fascinating aspects of ancient maritime history lies in the incredible technologies developed by early seafarers, tools and techniques so advanced that they rivaled the ingenuity of later centuries. Take the astrolabe, for instance. This intricate device, often made of brass or wood, allowed sailors to measure the angle of celestial bodies like the sun or stars above the horizon. By calculating these angles, they could determine their latitude and plot their course across vast, uncharted waters. It's astonishing to think that such precise navigation was possible long before the invention of GPS or even the magnetic compass. But the astrolabe was just one piece of the puzzle. Ancient mariners also relied heavily on their knowledge of the night sky. Constellations like Ursa Minor and the North Star served as celestial guideposts, helping sailors maintain their bearings even in the darkest nights. They understood the rhythms of the tides, the patterns of the wind, and the behavior of marine life, all of which provided clues to their location and direction. This blend of astronomy, mathematics, and practical observation was nothing short of revolutionary for its time. Yet, despite their brilliance, many of these technologies and techniques were lost to history. As empires rose and fell, and as trade routes shifted, the knowledge of how to navigate by the stars or construct instruments like the astrolabe faded into obscurity. Some of these methods were only rediscovered centuries later, when European explorers began venturing into the open seas during the Age of Discovery. Even then, the rediscovery often came with a sense of awe. How could ancient civilizations have achieved such mastery over the oceans without the tools we consider essential today? This mystery only deepens when we consider the sheer scale of their voyages. Ancient sailors weren't just hugging coastlines, they were crossing entire oceans from the Mediterranean to the Indian Ocean and beyond. They connected distant cultures, transported goods, and shared ideas, all without the benefit of modern technology. It's a testament to their skill, courage, and ingenuity. And while much of their knowledge was lost, some of it has been preserved in the most unexpected places beneath the waves. Shipwrecks, often seen as tragedies, have become treasure troves for archaeologists and historians. These sunken vessels hold clues to the tools, techniques, and technologies that ancient mariners relied on, offering us a glimpse into a world that once seemed lost to time. But how exactly do these shipwrecks help us piece together the puzzle of ancient maritime technology? That's a story waiting to be uncovered. Beneath the waves, hidden for centuries, shipwrecks lie as silent witnesses to history, time capsules of the past, waiting to reveal their secrets. These submerged relics are more than just remnants of disaster. They are treasure troves of information, offering archaeologists a rare glimpse into the lives, technologies, and trade routes of ancient civilizations. When a ship sank, it carried with it not only its cargo but also the story of its journey, frozen in time under layers of sediment and salt water. One of the most extraordinary examples is the Uluburun shipwreck, discovered off the coast of modern-day Turkey. Dating back to the late 14th century BC, this vessel was a floating testament to the vast networks of ancient trade. Its cargo included an astonishing array of goods: copper ingots from Cyprus, amber from the Baltic, ebony from Africa, and even glass beads from Mesopotamia. But what makes the Uluburun wreck truly remarkable is how it paints a vivid picture of interconnectedness. Here was a single ship carrying treasures from across the ancient world, proof that even thousands of years ago, distant cultures were linked by the threads of commerce and curiosity. These shipwrecks don't just tell us what was traded, they reveal how it was traded. The meticulous arrangement of cargo, the tools used by sailors, and even the personal belongings of the crew provide clues about the logistics and daily lives of those who navigated the ancient seas. Every amphora, every shard of pottery, every piece of jewelry is a piece of a puzzle, helping us reconstruct the vibrant tapestry of ancient maritime trade. The discoveries from these underwater sites also challenge our assumptions about the past. For instance, the Uluburun ship carried items that suggest a level of sophistication in trade networks far beyond what historians once imagined. It's not just about the goods, it's about the relationships. These shipwrecks show us that ancient civilizations weren't isolated. They were part of a globalized system, exchanging not only materials but also ideas, technologies, and cultures. As we uncover these sunken treasures, we're reminded that the sea was never a barrier. It was a bridge. And while these shipwrecks give us a glimpse into the mechanics of ancient trade, they also hint at something deeper, the human connections that made it all possible. From the craftsmen who created the goods to the sailors who braved the open waters, these wrecks tell stories of ambition, ingenuity, and the universal desire to explore beyond the horizon. But the story doesn't end with the artifacts. The true legacy of these ancient voyages lies in the cultural exchanges they facilitated, exchanges that shaped the world as we know it today. And that's where our journey takes us next, to the people, ideas, and traditions that flowed across the seas, forever altering the course of history. The ancient seas were far more than just highways for commerce. They were bustling corridors of cultural exchange, where ideas, beliefs, and artistic traditions traveled as freely as the goods aboard the ships. Picture a merchant vessel sailing from the shores of India, its hull filled with spices and textiles, but also carrying something far more profound, the teachings of Buddhism. As these ships made their way to Southeast Asia, they didn't just deliver goods, they brought an entire worldview. Monks and scholars often traveled alongside traders, spreading Buddhist philosophy, architecture, and art to lands like Sri Lanka, Myanmar, and Indonesia. Temples began to rise, sculptures took on new forms, and the spiritual landscape of these regions was forever transformed. But it wasn't just religion that traveled these routes. Artistic styles also crossed oceans, blending and evolving in unexpected ways. Take, for example, the influence of Greek art on Indian sculpture during the Hellenistic period. When Alexander the Great's campaigns brought Greek culture to the edges of India, the resulting fusion created what's known as Greco-Buddhist art. Statues of the Buddha began to feature flowing robes and naturalistic poses, a stark departure from earlier, more abstract depictions. This artistic dialogue didn't stop there. It rippled outward, shaping the visual traditions of Central Asia and beyond. Port cities played a crucial role in this cultural melting pot. Places like Alexandria in Egypt and Zanzibar off the coast of East Africa became hubs where people from vastly different backgrounds mingled. In Alexandria, the famous library stood as a testament to the exchange of knowledge, housing texts from Greek, Egyptian, Persian, and Indian scholars. Meanwhile, Zanzibar's markets buzzed with the languages of traders from Arabia, India, and Africa, each bringing their own customs, cuisines, and crafts. These cities weren't just stops along a trade route, they were vibrant centers of innovation, where cultures collided and created something entirely new. This blending of traditions reminds us that maritime trade was never just about material wealth. It was about connection, the sharing of ideas that shaped civilizations in ways we're still uncovering today. And yet, not every interaction on the high seas was peaceful or cooperative. As we turn our focus to the darker side of ancient maritime history, we'll explore how piracy and conflict also played a significant role in shaping the world of trade and cultural exchange. Imagine a time when the seas were as much a battleground as the land, a time when pirates weren't just the stuff of legend but a very real threat to empires. Long before the golden age of piracy in the Caribbean, ancient civilizations faced their own maritime marauders. These weren't just isolated bands of thieves, they were organized forces that could bring entire trade networks to their knees. Take the Sea Peoples, for example. This mysterious coalition of raiders emerged in the late Bronze Age, sweeping across the Mediterranean and leaving destruction in their wake. Their attacks were so devastating that they contributed to the collapse of several powerful kingdoms, reshaping the political and economic landscape of the ancient world. But piracy wasn't confined to the Mediterranean. Far to the east, the South China Sea had its own share of maritime bandits. These pirates preyed on the lucrative trade routes connecting China to Southeast Asia and beyond, disrupting the flow of goods like silk, spices, and precious metals. Their raids weren't just about plunder, they were a constant reminder of the vulnerability of even the most advanced civilizations. And it wasn't just merchants who suffered. Entire cities and kingdoms had to adapt, fortifying their ports and investing in naval defenses to protect their wealth and power. One of the most dramatic responses to ancient piracy came from the Romans. In the 1st century BC, the Cilician pirates of the eastern Mediterranean had grown so bold that they even kidnapped Julius Caesar himself. This wasn't just an affront to Rome's dignity, it was a direct challenge to its dominance. The Roman Republic launched a massive campaign under the command of Pompey the Great, who was granted unprecedented powers to eradicate the pirate threat. Within a few short years, Pompey's forces cleared the seas, restoring trade and securing Rome's control over the Mediterranean. This wasn't just a military victory, it was a turning point in the history of maritime trade, demonstrating how piracy could shape the fate of empires. Yet, as we'll soon see, piracy was only one of the many challenges that ancient seafarers faced. The decline of these once thriving maritime networks didn't happen overnight, and it wasn't caused by a single factor. What brought an end to this golden age of ancient trade? That's a story of shifting economies, changing climates, and the rise of new powers, a story we'll explore next. The once thriving maritime networks that connected ancient civilizations didn't fade overnight. Their decline was a slow unraveling, shaped by a combination of political upheaval, environmental shifts, and changing trade priorities. One of the most significant blows came with the fall of the Roman Empire. For centuries, Rome's dominance had turned the Mediterranean into a bustling hub of commerce, where goods, ideas, and cultures flowed freely. But as the empire crumbled, so too did the stability of these trade routes. Pirates began to plague the seas, and the lack of a centralized authority meant that safe passage was no longer guaranteed. The Mediterranean, once a lifeline for countless communities, became a shadow of its former self. Meanwhile, in the Indian Ocean, another catastrophe was brewing. The Black Death, one of history's deadliest pandemics, swept through Asia, the Middle East, and Europe in the 14th century. Port cities, which were vital nodes in the maritime trade network, were hit particularly hard. With populations decimated and economies in shambles, the flow of goods like spices, silk, and precious metals slowed to a trickle. The interconnectedness that had once been the region's strength now became its vulnerability as the disease spread rapidly along trade routes. Climate change also played a role in the decline of these ancient networks. Shifts in weather patterns disrupted agriculture, making it harder for coastal communities to sustain themselves. Rising sea levels and increased storm activity made navigation more perilous, discouraging merchants from venturing out on long voyages. At the same time, overland routes began to gain favor. The Silk Road, for example, offered an alternative to the risks of sea travel, allowing goods to move across continents without the need for ships. As these land-based pathways grew in popularity, maritime trade routes gradually lost their prominence. But even as these networks faded, they left behind a legacy that would eventually inspire their rediscovery. The stories of lost riches and forgotten connections lingered in the collective memory, waiting to be unearthed by explorers and scholars in later centuries. And as we'll see, the rediscovery of these ancient maritime routes would reshape the world once again. The mysteries of ancient maritime trade are gradually coming to light, thanks to groundbreaking advancements in modern archaeology and technology. Underwater drones equipped with high-resolution cameras and sonar are now exploring the ocean floor, uncovering shipwrecks and submerged ruins that have lain hidden for centuries. Meanwhile, satellite imaging has revolutionized how we map ancient coastlines and identify long-forgotten ports. These tools are not just revealing lost artifacts, they're rewriting entire chapters of history. Take, for example, the ancient port of Muziris in India. Once a bustling hub of trade between the Roman Empire and South Asia, it was thought to have vanished without a trace. But recent excavations, guided by satellite data and underwater surveys, have uncovered remnants of its docks, warehouses, and even Roman coins. This discovery has shed light on the scale and sophistication of ancient trade networks, proving that Muziris was a vital link in a global exchange of goods, ideas, and cultures. These findings are reshaping our understanding of how interconnected the ancient world truly was. Far from being isolated civilizations, societies across continents were deeply intertwined through maritime trade. And as we continue to uncover these lost routes, we gain a clearer picture of how goods like spices, silk, and precious metals traveled thousands of miles, connecting empires and shaping economies. But what made these ancient ports so crucial to global trade? How did they function as the lifeblood of commerce and cultural exchange? Stay with us as we dive into the world of ancient ports and their pivotal role in shaping the course of history. Imagine standing on the bustling docks of ancient Ostia, the gateway to Rome, where ships from across the Mediterranean unloaded their treasures. This was no ordinary harbor, it was a lifeline connecting empires, cultures, and economies. Ports like Ostia, Carthage, and Guangzhou weren't just places to dock ships, they were the beating hearts of global trade where the world's wealth and ideas converged. These hubs thrived as melting pots where merchants from distant lands exchanged not only goods but also languages, religions, and technologies. Take Carthage, for example. This North African powerhouse wasn't just a port, it was a symbol of innovation. Its circular harbor, with its intricate system of docks and shipyards, was a marvel of ancient engineering. And then there was Guangzhou, the jewel of the South China Sea, where Silk Road goods met the maritime routes, creating a vibrant crossroads of East and West. These ports were more than just trading centers, they were the birthplaces of globalization itself. But what made these ancient ports so effective? It wasn't just their location, it was their infrastructure. Lighthouses guided ships safely to shore, while massive warehouses stored everything from spices to silks. Quays and docks were built to handle the constant flow of goods, and customs officials kept meticulous records of every shipment. These weren't just random structures, they were the backbone of a system that connected continents. As goods flowed through these ports, they carried more than just material wealth, they carried the seeds of civilizations. The next time you think about the ancient world, picture these ports as the engines of progress, where the exchange of goods shaped the course of history. And speaking of goods, let's dive deeper into the treasures that traveled these routes, luxuries that didn't just fuel economies but transformed entire societies. Long before the age of globalization, certain goods held power so immense that they shaped the course of civilizations. Take Chinese silk, for instance. This luxurious fabric wasn't just a symbol of wealth, it was a currency of diplomacy traded along the Silk Road and beyond. Emperors gifted it to foreign rulers, and Roman elites coveted it so much that they were willing to pay its weight in gold. But silk wasn't just about opulence, it connected distant cultures, sparking exchanges of ideas, art, and even technologies that rippled across continents. Then there were the spices of India, cinnamon, pepper, and cardamom, that transformed not just cuisines but entire economies. These aromatic treasures were so valuable that they fueled the rise of powerful trade empires and even drove explorers to chart unknown seas. The demand for spices was so intense that it led to the discovery of new maritime routes, forever altering the map of the world. Imagine a time when a handful of peppercorns could buy a family's freedom or secure a merchant's fortune. It's no exaggeration to say that the spice trade was one of the earliest forms of global capitalism. And let's not forget African gold, which flowed through ancient trade networks like the lifeblood of empires. This precious metal wasn't just used for jewelry or coins, it was a tool of political power. The Kingdom of Mali, for example, became legendary for its wealth, with Mansa Musa's pilgrimage to Mecca showcasing such an abundance of gold that it disrupted economies along his route for years. Gold's allure drove exploration, conquest, and even the rise of banking systems that laid the groundwork for modern finance. But perhaps one of the most fascinating examples of a trade goods cultural impact is Tyrian purple dye. Produced from the mucus of sea snails, this vibrant color was so rare and labor-intensive to create that it became the ultimate status symbol in the Roman Empire. Wearing garments dyed in Tyrian purple was a privilege reserved for emperors and the elite, a visual declaration of power that transcended language and borders. The lengths to which people went to obtain these goods, whether silk, spices, gold, or dye, reveal how deeply trade shaped not just economies but the very fabric of human ambition and ingenuity. As we marvel at the influence of these trade goods, it's worth considering who else played a pivotal role in these ancient networks. Behind every shipment of silk, every sack of spices, and every bar of gold were individuals whose stories often go untold. Among them were women, merchants, weavers, and leaders whose contributions were just as vital to the success of maritime trade. Their roles, though often overlooked, offer a fascinating glimpse into the untold chapters of history. While the image of ancient maritime trade often conjures up visions of rugged sailors and powerful merchant kings, there's a hidden thread woven into this tapestry: the indispensable role of women. Far from being mere bystanders, women were active participants, shaping the economic and cultural landscapes of ancient trade networks in ways that history has only begun to uncover. Take, for instance, the female traders of ancient Arabia, who thrived in bustling markets like those in Mecca and Medina. These women were not just sellers of goods but savvy merchants who navigated complex trade routes, dealing in everything from spices to textiles and often financing entire voyages. Their influence extended beyond commerce as they played a key role in fostering cultural exchange, connecting distant regions through shared traditions and ideas. Across the Indian Ocean, in the matriarchal societies of Southeast Asia, women held even more prominent roles. In places like Sumatra and Java, women often managed entire trading enterprises, overseeing fleets and negotiating deals with foreign merchants. These societies placed women at the center of both economic and social life, challenging the notion that maritime trade was exclusively a male domain. Their contributions weren't just about wealth, they were about creating networks of trust and cooperation that spanned oceans, weaving together communities across vast distances. Yet, despite their undeniable impact, the stories of these women have often been overshadowed by the grand narratives of kings and conquerors. Why is that? Perhaps it's because their achievements, though profound, were woven into the everyday fabric of life, less about conquest and more about connection. But make no mistake, their legacy is just as vital to understanding the full story of ancient maritime trade. And speaking of stories, the next chapter of this journey takes us into the realm of myth and legend, where the seas were not just pathways for trade but stages for tales of adventure, mystery, and the unknown. What truths might these ancient stories hold? Let's set sail and find out. The oceans have always been more than just vast expanses of water. They've been the stage for some of humanity's most enduring myths and legends. Ancient civilizations, awestruck by the power and mystery of the seas, wove stories that reflected their reverence, fear, and curiosity about the unknown. Take the Greek epic of Odysseus, for instance. Homer's tale of his perilous journey home is filled with sea monsters, sirens, and vengeful gods, all embodying the unpredictable dangers sailors faced. These weren't just thrilling adventures, they were cautionary tales reminding people of the ocean's immense power and the need for respect. On the other side of the world, the Chinese legend of the Dragon King paints a different yet equally fascinating picture. In this myth, the Dragon King ruled the seas, controlling storms and tides. Sailors would offer prayers and sacrifices to appease him, hoping for safe passage. Unlike the Greek stories of chaos and struggle, this legend reflects a belief in balance and harmony with the natural world. Both myths, though rooted in different cultures, reveal how ancient societies sought to make sense of the ocean's mysteries, its beauty, its dangers, and its role in their lives. These stories weren't just entertainment, they were a way for people to process their relationship with the sea. They show us how the ocean was seen as both a source of life and a force to be feared. But while myths helped explain the unknown, they also hint at something deeper: the environmental realities that shape these narratives, the storms, the unpredictable currents, and even the marine life that inspired these tales were part of a fragile ecosystem that early sailors and traders depended on and sometimes disrupted. This brings us to an intriguing question. How did ancient maritime trade impact the very environment that inspired these stories? Next, we'll dive into the environmental footprint of these early voyages, exploring how human activity began to shape the oceans long before modern industrialization. As ancient civilizations expanded their reach across the seas, the environmental consequences of their maritime trade began to ripple far beyond their harbors. One of the most significant impacts was deforestation. To build the vast fleets needed for long-distance trade, entire forests were felled, particularly in regions like the Mediterranean and Southeast Asia. Timber was prized for its strength and durability, but the unchecked demand for shipbuilding materials stripped landscapes bare, altering ecosystems and leaving lasting scars on the environment. This wasn't just a local issue. Deforestation disrupted entire habitats, contributing to soil erosion and even climate changes that echoed across centuries. But the environmental impact didn't stop there. Ancient trade ships, often laden with goods from distant lands, became unwitting carriers of invasive species. Rats, for example, stowed away on vessels, spreading to new regions where they wreaked havoc on local wildlife and agriculture. These rodents weren't just a nuisance, they introduced diseases that decimated populations, both human and animal. The Black Plague, one of history's most devastating pandemics, is thought to have spread in part through the movement of rats on trade ships. Similarly, plants and insects hitched rides on these voyages, disrupting ecosystems and outcompeting native species. These ancient introductions set the stage for ecological imbalances that we're still grappling with today. The legacy of these environmental changes is a stark reminder of how interconnected our world has always been. What began as a quest for wealth and connection transformed landscapes in ways no one could have foreseen. And as we look back at these ancient practices, it's impossible not to see parallels in our modern world, where global trade continues to shape the environment in profound ways. Yet, while the environmental toll of ancient trade is undeniable, it's only one piece of a much larger story. The seas weren't just highways for goods, they were also conduits for ideas, beliefs, and faith. As we turn our attention to the role of religion in maritime trade, we'll see how spiritual traditions traveled alongside spices and silks, shaping cultures and connecting distant shores in ways that transcended the physical world. Religion and maritime trade were deeply intertwined, with ships not only carrying spices, silks, and gold, but also ideas, beliefs, and sacred texts. Across the vast oceans, Buddhism, Christianity, and Islam found new shores, spreading their teachings far beyond their places of origin. Missionaries and pilgrims often traveled alongside merchants, using the same routes to bring their faith to distant lands. These journeys weren't just about trade, they were about connection, creating a web of cultural and spiritual exchange that reshaped entire regions. Take Buddhism, for example. By the 1st century, it had already spread from India to Southeast Asia, carried by monks and traders who sailed along the Indian Ocean trade routes. These travelers didn't just bring religious texts, they introduced art, architecture, and even new forms of governance. Similarly, Christianity found its way to distant ports like Ethiopia and Kerala in India, carried by early Christian communities and later by European missionaries during the Age of Exploration. The faiths didn't just spread, they adapted, blending with local cultures and creating unique expressions of belief. But perhaps one of the most fascinating examples is the spread of Islam to Indonesia, a region now home to the largest Muslim population in the world. Islam arrived not through conquest but through trade, brought by Arab and Persian merchants who settled in coastal cities. Over time, local rulers adopted the faith, and it gradually became a unifying force across the archipelago. This wasn't just a religious shift, it was a cultural transformation, with Islamic art, literature, and architecture leaving a lasting imprint on the region. As we look at how these religions traveled across the seas, it's clear that maritime trade was more than an economic engine. it was a bridge for ideas, beliefs, and traditions. And speaking of bridges, these ancient sailors didn't just rely on faith to guide them. They also depended on something far more tangible, maps. But how did these early navigators chart their course across uncharted waters? That's a story we'll explore next. The art of mapping the world is far older than many realize, and ancient civilizations were surprisingly adept at charting their surroundings despite the technological limitations of their time. One of the earliest known examples is the Babylonian world map, dating back to around 600 BCE. This clay tablet, though rudimentary by today's standards, offers a glimpse into how early societies conceptualized their world. It depicts Babylon at the center, surrounded by a circular ocean and distant, mysterious lands. While not a navigational tool in the modern sense, it reflects a profound desire to understand and represent the world, a desire that would only grow stronger as empires expanded and trade routes flourished. Fast forward to the Roman Empire, and we encounter the work of Claudius Ptolemy, a Greek-Egyptian scholar whose maps would influence European cartography for centuries. Ptolemy's maps, created in the 2nd century CE, were remarkably detailed for their time. They included lines of latitude and longitude, a revolutionary concept that laid the groundwork for modern mapmaking. These maps weren't just decorative, they were practical tools for sailors and merchants navigating the vast expanse of the Mediterranean and beyond. The accuracy of Ptolemy's work raises an intriguing question. How did ancient mapmakers achieve such precision without the instruments we rely on today? The answer lies in their keen observation of the stars, the sun, and the landmarks along coastlines, skills honed over generations of seafaring. But here's the mystery. Some ancient maps seem to depict regions with an accuracy that defies explanation. Take, for example, the Piri-Reis map from the early 16th century, which some claim shows parts of Antarctica long before its official discovery. While its origins are debated, it reminds us that ancient mariners possessed knowledge that modern historians are still trying to fully understand. These maps weren't just tools for navigation, they were repositories of collective wisdom, passed down through oral traditions and practical experience. The development of these maps was inseparable from the growth of maritime trade. Accurate charts allowed merchants to plan safer, more efficient routes, connecting distant cultures and fueling the exchange of goods, ideas, and technology. Yet, even the best maps couldn't account for one unpredictable factor: the weather. Storms, winds, and currents could make or break a voyage, and understanding these natural forces was just as crucial as knowing the lay of the land, or in this case, the sea. The vast oceans of the ancient world were not just highways for trade, but also arenas of constant struggle against nature's unpredictable forces. Weather patterns, particularly monsoons and storms, played a decisive role in shaping the success or failure of maritime voyages. For sailors, the monsoon winds were both a blessing and a curse. These seasonal winds, which blew steadily from the southwest in summer and the northeast in winter, created a natural clock for trade routes between India and Arabia. Merchants relied on these predictable patterns to time their journeys, ensuring they could sail with the wind at their backs. But the same monsoons that propelled ships forward could also unleash devastating storms, turning calm seas into deadly traps. Imagine setting sail from an Indian port like Muziris, laden with spices, textiles, and precious gems, only to be caught in a sudden tempest. Ancient ships, often built from wood and held together with rope and pitch, were no match for the fury of the open ocean. Sailors faced the constant threat of shipwrecks, with waves powerful enough to snap masts and tear hulls apart. Even if a ship survived the storm, the loss of cargo could spell financial ruin for merchants and sailors alike. To mitigate these risks, ancient mariners developed ingenious strategies. They studied the stars, observed cloud formations, and passed down generations of knowledge about wind patterns and safe harbors. Some even carried sacred talismans or offered prayers to sea gods, hoping for divine protection against the elements. One remarkable example of adaptation was the use of the monsoon winds by Arab and Indian traders. By aligning their voyages with the seasonal shifts, they created a thriving trade network that connected distant cultures. Goods from India would reach Arabia in time for overland caravans to transport them further into the Mediterranean world. This intricate dance with the weather wasn't just about survival, it was a testament to human ingenuity and resilience. Yet, even with these advancements, the sea remained a formidable adversary, reminding us that ancient maritime trade was as much about courage as it was about commerce. As we uncover the challenges posed by nature, another fascinating layer of ancient maritime history comes into focus: the laws and customs that govern these perilous journeys. How did ancient societies establish rules to protect their ships, crews, and cargo? What role did these early maritime laws play in shaping the world of trade we know today? The answers lie in the next chapter of this story. The seas of the ancient world were more than just highways for trade. They were also arenas of order and regulation, governed by some of the earliest known maritime laws. One of the most influential of these was the Rhodian Sea Law, a set of rules crafted around 2,000 years ago. This legal code wasn't just about settling disputes, it was a blueprint for cooperation, ensuring that sailors, merchants, and traders from different cultures could interact fairly and safely. The Rhodian laws covered everything from cargo rights to shipwreck protocols, offering a framework that allowed commerce to flourish across the Mediterranean. But the Rhodian Sea Law was just the beginning. Over time, other treaties and agreements emerged, reflecting the growing complexity of maritime trade. City-states like Athens and Carthage negotiated pacts to protect their merchants, while empires like Rome established broader legal systems to govern their vast networks of sea routes. These laws didn't just prevent chaos, they fostered trust. Traders knew that if a storm destroyed their goods or a rival ship tried to claim their cargo, there were rules in place to resolve the issue. This sense of security was crucial, encouraging even more distant and ambitious voyages. What's fascinating is how these ancient laws laid the groundwork for modern maritime practices. Many of the principles we take for granted today, like the idea of shared responsibility in accidents or the protection of maritime borders, can be traced back to these early systems. They were a testament to the ingenuity of ancient societies, proving that even in a world without satellites or instant communication, people found ways to create order on the open seas. And speaking of ingenuity, the laws governing trade were only as effective as the ships that carried the goods. The vessels themselves had to be reliable, durable, and capable of navigating unpredictable waters. But how did ancient civilizations build ships that could meet these demands? What secrets did they uncover in their quest to master the art of shipbuilding? That's where our journey takes us next. The ancient world was a masterclass in innovation, especially when it came to shipbuilding. From the sleek, fast-moving triremes of Greece to the sturdy, expansive junks of China, each vessel was a testament to the ingenuity of its creators. But what made these ships so remarkable, it wasn't just their design, it was the way they were tailored to their purpose. Take the Greek trireme, for example. With its 3 rows of oars and a bronze-plated ram at the prow, this ship was built for speed and power, ideal for dominating the seas during warfare. On the other side of the world, Chinese junks were constructed with wide, flat hulls and multiple sails, perfect for carrying heavy cargo across vast distances. These ships weren't just tools, they were symbols of their culture's priorities and ambitions. Yet, for all their brilliance, many of these ancient shipbuilding techniques have vanished into the mists of time. How could such advanced knowledge simply disappear? Some historians believe it was the result of shifting priorities as empires rose and fell. Others point to the lack of written records, with secrets passed down orally from master shipwright to apprentice, only to be lost when those traditions faded. It's a mystery that still puzzles researchers today, leaving us to wonder what other maritime marvels might have been lost to history. But the story doesn't end with shipbuilding. These ancient vessels weren't just floating works of art, they were weapons, tools, and lifelines for entire civilizations. And when they took to the seas, they often did so with a purpose far more dramatic than trade or exploration. What role did these ships play in the high-stakes world of ancient maritime warfare? That's where our journey heads next. Navies were not just tools of conquest in the ancient world. They were the lifeblood of empires, safeguarding the trade routes that fueled their wealth and power. Picture this: vast fleets of ships bristling with oars and sails, patrolling the Mediterranean, the Indian Ocean, and beyond. These vessels weren't just built for speed or cargo capacity. They were designed to dominate the seas, ensuring that no rival could disrupt the flow of goods, ideas, and influence. From the Phoenicians to the Romans, maritime warfare became a cornerstone of strategy as empires vied for control over the world's most lucrative waterways. One of the most iconic moments in ancient naval history was the Battle of Salamis in 480 BCE. This clash between the Greek city-states and the mighty Persian Empire wasn't just a fight for survival, it was a turning point in history. The Greeks, though vastly outnumbered, used their knowledge of local waters and superior ship designs to outmaneuver the Persian fleet. Their victory didn't just secure Greece's independence, it preserved the cultural and political foundations of Western civilization. Imagine the ripple effects. Had the Persians won, the course of history might have been dramatically different. But naval warfare wasn't just about epic battles. It was also about maintaining control over key trade routes, like the Strait of Gibraltar or the Red Sea. The ancient Egyptians, for example, relied on their navy to protect the flow of goods like gold, incense, and spices from Nubia and the Arabian Peninsula. Similarly, the Carthaginians used their formidable fleet to dominate trade in the Western Mediterranean, until their eventual clash with Rome in the Punic Wars. These conflicts weren't just about territory, they were about who would control the arteries of global commerce. The legacy of ancient maritime warfare is still felt today. The strategies developed by these early civilizations laid the groundwork for modern naval tactics, while their efforts to secure trade routes set the stage for the interconnected world we live in. And speaking of connections, the role of ancient maritime trade didn't end with warfare. It also planted the seeds for something we now call globalization. But that's a story for the next chapter. Centuries before cargo ships crisscrossed the oceans and airplanes dotted the skies, ancient mariners were already weaving the first threads of what we now call globalization. Picture this: a Phoenician merchant in the Mediterranean loading his ship with purple dye, a luxury item coveted by kings and nobles across the ancient world. This wasn't just a simple trade, it was the beginning of a vast network that connected distant civilizations, from the bustling markets of Mesopotamia to the shores of North Africa and beyond. These early traders didn't just move goods, they carried ideas, technologies, and cultural practices that transformed societies in ways we're still uncovering today. The exchange of goods like spices, silk, and precious metals was only part of the story. Alongside these tangible treasures flowed something even more powerful: knowledge. The compass, for instance, might have been perfected in China, but its spread across the maritime world revolutionized navigation, making long-distance travel safer and more predictable. Similarly, shipbuilding techniques evolved as cultures borrowed and improved upon each other's designs. The Greeks adopted the trireme from the Phoenicians, while the Romans later adapted it for their own naval dominance. This cross-pollination of ideas didn't just shape ancient economies, it laid the groundwork for the interconnected systems we rely on today. But perhaps the most enduring legacy of ancient maritime trade is the cultural exchange it fostered. Imagine a Roman merchant in India marveling at the intricate carvings of a Hindu temple, or a Chinese diplomat in Persia bringing back stories of Zoroastrian rituals. These encounters weren't just fleeting moments of curiosity. They sparked a blending of traditions, beliefs, and artistic styles that continue to influence our world. The Silk Road, often celebrated for its overland routes, was just one part of a much larger network that included bustling sea lanes stretching from the Red Sea to the South China Sea. These routes didn't just transport goods, they carried the seeds of globalization, planting them in fertile soil across continents. As we reflect on these ancient connections, it's striking how familiar some of these patterns feel. The challenges faced by ancient traders navigating treacherous waters, overcoming language barriers, and building trust across cultures mirror the complexities of our modern global economy. Yet, what's even more fascinating are the mysteries we've yet to solve. How did ancient mariners navigate vast oceans without modern tools? What stories lie hidden in the shipwrecks scattered across the ocean floor? These questions remind us that, despite our advancements, the ancient world still holds secrets waiting to be uncovered. And as we dive deeper into these mysteries, we'll uncover not just the past, but the enduring legacy of those who first dared to sail beyond the horizon. Even today, the ancient maritime trade routes hold secrets that refuse to be unraveled. While we've pieced together fragments of their journeys, many questions linger like whispers on the wind. For instance, how did sailors navigate vast, uncharted waters without the tools we take for granted today? What exact paths did they follow, and how did they adapt to the unpredictable moods of the sea? These are puzzles that still puzzle historians and archaeologists alike. One of the most tantalizing mysteries is the fate of countless ships that vanished without a trace. Ancient records speak of vessels loaded with treasures, spices, and rare goods, only to disappear into the horizon, never to return. What happened to these ships? Were they claimed by violent storms, or did they fall victim to piracy, their stories lost to time? The ocean guards these stories tightly, and every discovery, like a sunken shipwreck or a fragment of pottery, offers only a tantalizing glimpse into the past. But it's not just the physical remnants that captivate us. The cultural exchanges facilitated by these ancient voyages also leave us with unanswered questions. How did ideas, languages, and traditions spread across such vast distances? Who were the unsung heroes, the traders, sailors, and navigators who made these connections possible? Their names may be lost to history, but their legacy lives on in the artifacts and stories they left behind. These mysteries are more than just academic curiosities. They remind us of the courage and ingenuity of those who dared to explore the unknown, and they inspire modern researchers to keep searching for answers. As we stand on the shores of history, peering into the depths of the past, one thing is certain: the story of ancient maritime trade is far from finished. And as we'll see next, the future of research in this field holds the promise of uncovering even more of these hidden chapters, bringing us closer to understanding the full scope of humanity's seafaring legacy. The story of ancient maritime trade is far from finished. In fact, we're standing on the brink of a new era of discovery, thanks to cutting-edge technologies and innovative research methods that are reshaping how we understand the past. From underwater drones mapping sunken shipwrecks to advanced DNA analysis of ancient cargo, the tools at our disposal today are unlocking secrets that were once thought lost to time. Imagine being able to trace the journey of a single amphora, a clay jar used to transport goods, from its origin in the Mediterranean to a distant port in India, all by analyzing microscopic residues left behind. These breakthroughs aren't just filling gaps in the historical record. They're painting a vivid, interconnected picture of a world that thrived on trade long before modern globalization. One of the most exciting developments is the rise of interdisciplinary collaboration. Archaeologists are now teaming up with oceanographers, geneticists, and even climate scientists to piece together the puzzle of ancient maritime routes. For example, by studying ancient shipwrecks in the Red Sea, researchers are uncovering evidence of trade networks that link the Roman Empire with the Indian subcontinent. These findings aren't just about goods, they reveal cultural exchanges, shared technologies, and even the spread of ideas that shaped civilizations. It's a reminder that the oceans were never just barriers. They were bridges connecting distant peoples in ways we're only beginning to fully appreciate. But what's next? Ongoing projects around the globe are pushing the boundaries of what we know. In the Mediterranean, a team is using 3D imaging to reconstruct the cargo of a ship that sank over 2,000 years ago, offering clues about the goods that were most valued in antiquity. Meanwhile, in Southeast Asia, researchers are using satellite imagery to locate ancient ports swallowed by rising sea levels, revealing how climate change has impacted human history. These efforts aren't just academic, they're reshaping our understanding of how ancient societies adapted, innovated, and thrived in a world without modern technology. As we wrap up this exploration of ancient maritime trade, it's clear that the past still has much to teach us. The discoveries being made today are not only rewriting history books, but also offering lessons about resilience, cooperation, and the enduring human drive to explore and connect. And as we prepare to bring all these threads together, let's take a step back to reflect on what these ancient voyages mean for us today, how they shape the world we live in, and what they can inspire us to build for the future.